Jeny Basumatary from MA second year English, and I'm your host today. Research and Cultural Forum, that we refer to as RCF, is a vision brought to life by the joint efforts of the students and scholars of the Department of English to help excel in different academic activities. This weekly session provided the students and scholars with a platform to present papers, propose their ideas, and showcase their talents. Today, we have all gathered here for an invited talk by Professor Michel Pousse, former Chair, Department of English, University de La Réunion, and author of RK Narayan, Romancia et Timor. Now, before proceeding, I would like to call Ms. Harita T. Chandran, MA second year English, to deliver the welcome speech.
Good afternoon. I cordially welcome one and all to our weekly RCF sessions organized by Department of English, Pondicherry University. Firstly, I welcome our esteemed Dean of School of Humanities, Professor Clement S. Luz, who has persistently championed the department's perennial quest for academic excellence. I'd also like to welcome Professor T. Marks, revered Head of Department of English, the spearhead who propels the quest forward and acts as a ceaseless reservoir of academic inspiration. I'd also like to extend a hearty welcome to our respected RCF faculty coordinator, Dr. Aishwarya S. Babu and Dr. Harpreet Kaurwala, who act as the essential engines for the smooth functioning of the sessions. A warm welcome to our beloved mentors, Dr. Binu Zakaria, Dr. K. Rashmi, Dr. Lakimai Mili, Dr. S. Vishaka Devi, and Dr. Vidya Sarveshwar. Now, on behalf of the entire Department of English, I extend my sincere welcome to Professor Michael Pousse, former chair of the Department of English, University de La Réunion. We eagerly look forward to listening to your talk. Last but never the least, I would like to express a very hearty welcome to all the scholars and MA students from our department and express my gratitude to them for their participation as presenters, diligent audience, and helping hands for these sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harita. Now we will move ahead to the reading of the minutes of the previous RCF session. For that, I would like to call Ms. Irshana Farbin from MA second year English.
The 34th session of RCF 2023-24 was organized by the Department of English at 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, 9th of November 2023 in Seminar Hall 1, School of Humanities, Pondicherry University. Head of the department, Dr. T. Marks, Dr. S. Vishaka Devi, Dr. K. Rashmi, Dr. Aishwarya S. Babu, and Dr. Vidya Sarveshwar attended the session. The session began with a welcome address by Dirshalat T.K., student of 2nd MA English. Elora Chowdhury, student of 2nd MA English, read the minutes of the previous session. Henna Shireen, student of 2nd MA English, introduced the chief guest, Dr. Jasaratnam Devarapalli, Professor of Anthropology Department, Pondicherry University. Dr. T. Marks, head of the department, felicitated the guest speaker. The honorary guest, Dr. Jasaratnam Devarapalli, began his talk by introducing what anthropology is and in what way it is different from other disciplines. He emphasized that the primary objective of anthropology is to understand people in the way they lead and experience life on a day-to-day basis and how they perceive it. He discussed the various methodologies such as holistic, relativistic, historical, ethic and ethnographic approach that an anthropologist uses to achieve this objective. He also expanded upon the relationship between anthropology and literature and how anthropological intervention makes the position of the author clear to the readers. He ended his discussion by pointing out how the methodologies of anthropology can be used for writing realistic narrative in literature. He used Alex Haley's novel Roots, the saga of American family, to further illustrate this point. The presentation was followed by the questions from students, research scholars, and faculty members. As part of the culturals, the poem Cosmic Conscience by Sri Aurobindo was recited by B. Deepika, student of first MA English. The session was concluded with vote of thanks delivered by Guru Hari Kusum, student of second MA English. The session was completed by Febina F, student of second MA English. The event came to an end by 4:30 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Irshana Praveen. Now, I would like to call Jyotika R. Prasad, MA Second Year English, for introducing the guest.
Good afternoon. It gives me great delight to introduce our guest, Professor Michel Pousse, former Chair, Department of English, University de La Réunion, France. He has been a regular visitor to Pondicherry University since 1990. He offered a course in Indian English Literature for MA English students during one of his visits. He has adjudicated several PhD theses submitted by scholars in the Department of English and French at Pondicherry University. He traveled to various countries such as Madagascar and England, where he lectured on contemporary Indian and Indo-Anglican literature. He held various charges at the University de La Réunion as the head of the department, dean, and director of the University Teachers College. Among his publications, there are 2 books on RK Narayan and articles in reputed Indian and French journals. Also, there are several works on Indian society, history, as well as sports to his credit. Now, he is with us to give a lecture on the legacy of RK Narayan. We are eagerly waiting to hear you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jyotika. Now I would like to call upon Dr. Clement S. Lewis, Dean, School of Humanities, to felicitate the guest.
Thank you very much for your welcome. Many things are changing in India, but the welcome you give to visitors is always the same and very pleasant. And I hope you will still feel like clapping at the end of the conference. We'll see. So, I was asked by Dr. Lood to give a conference on RK Narayan, and I didn't know then that Professor Lood himself has a course on RK Narayan. So I hope I will be up to standards. I will be up to his standards anyway. So, too well packed. So you know about RK Narayan, novelist who lived to be almost 100 years old and who wrote basically in the 20th century. He wrote novels. I only speak about his novels. He also wrote short stories, a lot of short stories, a travelogue of his first visit to America, my Dacre's diary, and also so the photobiography, My Days, but he published My Days when he still had more than 20 or 30 years to live. So it was only the autobiography of his first half. So his first novels were published in 1935, and his last one in 1992. So you could write books on Narayan. I have written books on Narayan, and many people have written books on RK Narayan. So what new can we say? Well, we'll see. We'll try to say something new or to throw a new light on his writings. In the time of a conference, we are always time restricted. I cannot speak about everything, so I chose a few points, 7, and I will develop those points. It being understood that for each of these points, you could have at least a full conference and more. So it will be reduced to the main points. First of all, I'll present Narayan, the man. Then his idea on literature, how he thought, what he thought of literature. Then his use of the English language, which is very peculiar. Then the structure of his novels, which is also original. How he writes when he gets up in the morning, how he plans his books, if he plans them. And then I deal with one thing which to me is not at the heart of his novels, but very important, which is the West, the intrusion of the West into India. And he deals with that from almost the beginning to the end of his career. And my last point will be to analyze Narayan as a Gandhian novelist, influenced by Gandhi. And then you can relax, and I will do a conclusion and the end. So the man, Narayan the man. Why speak of the man, of the person, as a writer? Well, there's always a debate among critics. Either you should study the book itself and ignore the writer, or you should make a link between the book, the work, and the writer. It is a debate we have, for instance, also for the cinema industry, where you have some people who are nasty, I would say, accused of rape or whatever you like, but who produce beautiful films. And some people say you have to ban the film because of the person. Or not. Well, I think it is essential to know something on the author, because I think every author projects himself up to a certain point, but always projects himself in his work. The choice of his topics, the way he presents them, and in Narayan's case, I think it's fair to be familiar with the few events that shaped his life. Well, as you know, Narayan belonged to South India. Until he was 50, he never left his cultural triangle, Madras. I use the word Madras because during his time it was Madras. Madras, Coimbatore, Mysore. And he never left that triangle. And as he said before, he was 50, he had always eaten out of the same plate every day, never changed. So it was a very regular, a man of very regular habits. He was brought up in Madras as a single child, although he had brothers and sisters, but he didn't live with them, only during the holidays. So he was brought up by his grandmother. When his father was promoted to Mysore as the head teacher, he took Narayan with him and with the family. And then he got his BA. It took him 5 years to get a BA, which is not really a very, well, academic record, 5 years for a BA. But you understand that when you see what he thinks of literature. As soon as he had his BA, he decided that he wanted to be a writer and nothing else. But to be a writer and nothing else, he has to find money somewhere. So there he took advantage of the joint family system, and he lived off the fact of the joint family system until royalties arrived. The royalties arrived when he was almost 40. So afterwards, it was okay. So two events reveal that Narayan, who is often regarded as a very quiet man, had a strong personality. First one, problem of your age, he fell in love. He fell in love with a girl that he saw in the street. And he said, I want to marry that girl. So he went to see his father. He explained. Well, the father was open-minded enough, contacted the girl's family, and the girl's family accepted to discuss marriage conditions. Marriage was agreed upon until it was discovered that the horoscopes didn't match. And that there would be a problem. So Narayan, practical, found another astrologer who he paid a bit more than the first one, and that one read the stars, if you want, differently, and said the marriage could take place. So the marriage took place. But the first astrologer had predicted that the one who said the marriage couldn't, the couple wouldn't match, he said there would be a tragedy in the girl's family. And despite that, Narayan married. In a very, unconventional way. I think it would be unconventional today. And in those days, it was even more unconventional. So the tragedy occurred. Narayan's wife died just after the baby was born, Eva. So Narayan there again broke the social tradition. He refused to remarry, as was very conventional in those days, and he decided to bring up his daughter alone himself. So that was again going against the convention, the social convention of the day. So the rest of his life, as I said, was spent quietly. And once he began traveling, when he was 50, he visited America. He liked America, so he went there, and he gave lectures in several universities. Now, he has a strange personality, a double personality. When he addressed the press or journalists, he appeared as an easygoing, the man who doesn't care, who doesn't think about money, who lives in a long, peaceful world. In fact, he was a very different man. He gave, or officially he gave, in fact he sold, private papers to the University of Boston. And I had the opportunity of consulting those papers, his manuscripts, but also private papers. And when you read those private papers, you discover a man who was very money conscious. He always wanted his royalties to be checked, if they were translated, if it was paid, etc. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, huh? But the thing is, there's a difference between the public image and the private image. And to conclude on the person, I can tell you my personal experience with RK Narayan. When I wrote my book, which was published in America they are very careful about rights. So you can quote 200 words from a writer, and then you have to ask authorization. So I asked Narayan authorization. I said, I'm writing a book on you, and what? You give me authorization to cut more than 200 words in a full book. And his reply was, I give you my lawyer's address, and he will tell you how much you have to pay. So, man, I was a bit nasty. So I said, to cut it short, I wrote back to him, and I said, well, if I write a book on you, even if I might be critical of the point of view, it's because I like your books, and that is, in a way, publicity. Second, I was even more nasty, I said, there are books written by Indian people about you. Did you charge them something? Or do you think I'm the rich Westerner who has to pay? And the reply was, exception. You know, the reply was in those type blue letters, aerograms. respect himself. And he said, exceptionally, you can quote me free of charge unless the book is republished, reissued. He knew that such books are never reissued. So you see, it was an opposition between what he wanted to appear and what he was. Now, his approach to literature. Now, what is his approach to literature in general? When he was at university, particularly last year, he didn't have much to do, and so he read a lot, and classics and everything. And what is the criteria for a book? To him, the reader must enjoy the book, full stop. If you don't enjoy the book, don't finish it, don't bother. Even if it is Shakespeare, or Tolstoy, or Faulkner, if you think it's boring, then don't get bored, dump the book. So that goes against, you can understand that with such an attitude, it took him 5 years to get his BA, because presumably most of these lecturers expected something else. So there was a critic, Ved Mela. He interviewed Narayan, and I give you the result of his interview. His greatest test of a good author was his readability. Tolstoy, Joyce, Faulkner, all bores. He had read 100 pages of War and Peace and could not understand why E.M. Forster considered Tolstoy a happy god who could play with the entire world. He dumped it. Shakespeare was readable only in paperbacks with no footnotes and no edit, no explanation. So there you can see that, in a way, between his marriage, his refusal to remarry, his attitude is not really a conservative person. Also, when you read his novels, some people think, when they read his novel, that, oh yeah, he's very a simple poem. In fact, he has a strong personality. So he's not revolutionary like Mullah Janan, but he's a strong critic, and we'll see that a bit later, of the Indian way of life. To be more to the point, it does not criticize the Indian way of life as such. It doesn't criticize the social institutions. What it criticizes are the people. You see, people are no longer sincere towards those institutions. When they go to the temple, it's just routine, habit, that has no sincere faith. And the same for business people, the same for everything. So that is his opinion, and of course, this is what he put into his book. Now, when a writer dies, it is said that his works enter what we call a Christian view of post-mortem, a purgatory. You know, there's hell, heaven, and the purgatory in between. Okay? So, either at the end of this purgatory period, either the author remains popular or he is forgotten. So Narayan died 25 years ago, just a generation ago, and what's happening to him now? Is he still read, enjoyed, or is he being forgotten about? Well, he's read because his novels, even his short stories, are still published and still translated all the world over. Does not mean that he has ended up his purgatory period. One generation is not long enough. But the point is, the success of a novelist also depends on outside events. What happens in the world? And I'll give you two examples from my culture. You know, for a long time, in Europe and in the world, there was a conflict between Marxist countries, USSR and all that, and the other countries. And many novelists wrote books dealing with that conflict, like Sartre in France. And now, the communist bloc collapsed, and so nobody reads them. If you take Camus, was much more of a philosopher, he still read. Another example, take South Africa during the apartheid period. You had a writer known the world over, Patrick White, who wrote about apartheid. Specialized, of course. Huh? But now, apartheid is finished. Do you know one South African writer? It seems they have lost their theme of interest. So what will happen to Narayan? Is India changing a lot? And so people will say, well, it belongs to the past. Or do they still feel acquainted to what he wrote? Now, about his characters, personal characters, fictional characters. To be credible, a writer must create characters who are understandable the world over. Not just Narayan was from South India. He must write about people the world over. In other words, you can make a link between the South Indian character and somebody in Washington or in Moscow. So that is the difficulty. Characters must be universal. And problems are the same, then, as I said, everywhere. We shall go back to that, speaking about Malgudi style. You can remember Thomas Hardy. He wrote about Wessex, Casterbridge, Faulkner. They also create artificial places, and yet those places that never exist, you feel that you could live there. You feel that they belong to your inner vision of life. So Malgudi is India, not just Malgudi in South India. And that is, Narayan made it clear in a short passage in Mr. Sampa, one of his novels. It just says that Malgudi was visited by every main Indian character since when? I quote, "It might be in the 20th century BC, for all it matters, or 4000 BC. Rama, he was on his way to Lanka and looked about for a little water to make a paste for his forehead marking. There was no water. He pulled an arrow from his quiver and scratched a line on the sand, and water instantly appeared. Thus was born the river Sarayu, which is in the Malgudian. The Buddha came this way. The great Sankara appeared during the next millennium, and then the Christian missionary with his Bible, etc. So you cannot avoid coming to the conclusion that Malgudi, indeed, is the whole of India, to represent the whole of India from its eternal past. Now, in every novel, what is important is to have a blending of form and content, style and content. And if you don't have style, then your message is it's not a novel. It is a pamphlet, but it's not a novel. And if you have just style and no idea, it's no good either. So Narayan's legacy is on both form and content. Remember, his career spans 65 years, Swami and Friends, 1935, and Grandmother's Tale, 1992. So he's often associated over a long period of time with two other writers, Mulk Rajanand and Rajaram, particularly at the time when there was a fight for independence. They took sides, of course, differently. Now, what did those three writers introduce into Indo-Anglian literature? You know about the earlier writers, the Rosio, that these people. They were basically, I'm not going to speak about that, they were trying to imitate the British, write an English which was as good as British English, like Nehru's English, Oxford English. And Rao in Kantapura, Anand in all of his novels, and Narayan, they said, no, this is finished. We don't have to try and imitate. We have to just write our English. Anand's English is not the same as of Narayan's English, or Rao's English. I don't speak about the philosophical work of Rajara, I speak of Kantapura. Well, the three of them, each of them has a different style, but it is a natural Indo-Anglian style. At that time, they were not the only ones to speak politics. There was Venkatarani, Murugan, the Tila, etc. So why is it not included with them? Well, because Venkatarani was no novelist as such. He developed a sort of pamphlet. He defended the cause of the Tila, the cause of the poor people. But you say Anand was the same. Anand was a revolutionary, Marxist. All his books deal with Coolie and Chabot, Two Leaves and a Bird, etc. But there is a literary dimension. You like it or not, but there is a literary dimension. It doesn't exist in Venkatarani. And I think they opened the way to post-independence writers like Anita Desai, other ones, I don't have time to call them all, who also spoke about ordinary people in their own English. I would say the third break is Rushdie, but he is a different style, different approach to characters, etc. Now, what is a bit original, unusual, for a man who wrote 15 novels and over 65 years, I repeat myself. Well, he never changed his style. His style never evolved. If you read 2 pages at random of a novel by Narayan, you cannot say whether it belongs to his first period, his first novel, second novel, last novel. The style remains the same. Doesn't change it at all. The style doesn't change, Malgudi changes, of course. Huh? So, a bit more about his English, his use of English. As I said, the style doesn't change. And when you're Indian, particularly in the 1920s, 30s, it is strange, for us Europeans, to believe that why did they write in English when they were in fact against the British presence and they used the language of the colonizing power. You cannot imagine in France someone writing during the war in German against German. Unthinkable. He would be accused of being pro-German. But not so with them. So, English, Narayan said, was a natural medium. He never considered writing in any other language. And once you have chosen English, which standard of English should be adopted? As I said, you could speak the language of the Sabs, you could speak Indian English, and it can be very different. When you read Anand's English, it's very different from Narayan's English. It is, I would say, more difficult to understand for a European, because you have many structures which are not English. So you understand it, but he manages to instill non-British structure in his English. If you have 2 levels, the words, sentences, and the structure below. And the structure is different. So Narayan opted for the English he himself spoke. That is in keeping with his personality. That of an educated Indian, perfectly able to convey his feelings, emotions, in a language which he didn't try to make perfect. Far from that. As I said, he didn't try to imitate Nehru. And there is a critic, William Walsh, who was the first man to write a short book on Narayan. He describes Narayan's English. This complicated cargo is carried on in English style, which is limpid, simple, calm, unaffected, natural in its run and tone, and beautifully measured to its purpose. It has neither the American purr of the combustion engine, nor the thick marmalade quality of British English. and it communicates with complete ease a different and Indian sensibility. So, he developed a style of his own. What is also unusual about his use of English is that, unusual in fictional worlds, every single one of his characters speaks the same standard of English. Whether it is a teacher, a poor man, a lawyer, anything, they speak the same standard of English, which could sound artificial. In fact, when you read Narayan, you don't feel it's artificial, but yet it is surprising. And even though the priests all speak the same language, and people never seem to get angry. They're, as I said, calm. Now, some characters go abroad, very few, and they remain and are affected in a way. They can be physically affected, but never linguistically affected. For instance, in the vendor of sweet, you have Mali, the son of the vendor of sweet, who goes to America. And he returns. And when he returns, he is a different person, physically. He dresses like an American, eats, drinks like a Westerner, sleeps with his Korean girlfriend. So nothing is left of his old self, except his language. He has not been affected by any Americanism. He still speaks the same language. That is Narayan's choice, of course. I think he wanted to, create a language that could be easily understood, but as you know, particularly in Narayan's days, few Indians spoke English. Percentage must have been 5%. They are higher now, but in those days, not very many. And anyone who spoke English felt superior in those days. He speaks about a boy who is in the school, and he said he spoke English exactly like a European, which meant that few in the school could make out what he said. Many of his classmates could not trust themselves to speak to him. They felt of broken English being so small. So although these boys belong to a Christian school where the media of education is English, but yet they do not master it. Now, the structure of his novels has to move. As I said, you could have a full conference, better organized, about this topic. Now, the structure of Narayan's novels has often been overlooked, and particularly by Western critics. Why? Well, his structures seem to be simple. You see, that has helped to give him a reputation of an easy novelist. And it is true that plots unfold very smoothly, no flashback, few dialogues, no description of sceneries, you don't have landscape described. Characters hardly ever move out of Margaret, and in each novel he deals with one character, seldom two, like the Master of Malgudi or Spencer of Sign or something like that. And when there are two characters, they must be easily identified, totally different the one from the other. Secondary characters, supporting characters, they don't have a life of their own. They pop out when they are needed, like Gafu, the taximan, or the painter, and then up, they disappear again. You find them in another novel, but you don't know anything about their lives. This is just some useful adjunction. So that also has been read by Western critics as a weakness. Now, to appreciate this structure, one must remember what has been one and only literary ambition of Narayan. He wanted to be a modern storyteller. He said the novelist today is the equivalent of the storyteller. You know, the storyteller who went from village to village and sat under the banyan tree and began to either tell stories or recite the Ramayana or Mahabharata, etc. And he said the novelist must be the modern equivalent. So the structure of Narayan's novel is in fact the structure of a storyteller. As I said, there's one character. You cannot, when you tell a story, you cannot have many characters. You cannot have description of scenery. You cannot have dialogues. You cannot have all this kind of thing that you usually have in novels. So that's why it seems to be so simple. The storyteller addresses the whole village population, men, women, everybody. And Narayan's book can be read by everybody. There's no sex, no violence, and you can, a child of 12 can read it. So, start slowly, develop until it's a bit like a thriller, until there is some kind of a crisis. That means the character realizes that there is something wrong with him, with himself, and he has to adapt to a new situation. So like a formative novel. And once the crisis is over, then there's no reason why people should stay. They continue to listen to the storyteller. They know the end of the story. So there's a very quick ending, very abrupt ending to his novels. So it is, as I said, a particular structure. Now, in his books, in his novels, who are the characters? They are ordinary people. Remember Lakshman. I don't know if you remember Lakshman, the cartoonist. He was Narayan's brother. And he also, if you remember his cartoons, or if you have access to them, he described the common man, the man who is critical, gently critical of everything. And Narayan writes about the common man. I gave you a quotation of a lecture he gave at the Sahitya Academy. Our hero today is not a crowned head wielding a sword, but the unknown common man, armed with nothing more than an old umbrella as he sallies forth out of his home to face the life's problems each day. The material for a writer is unlimited, provided he does not isolate himself from society. So, you see, he wants to describe society, but the ordinary people. There's nobody very rich in Narayan's novels. And, well, poor people are only alluded to, but are not there either. And the India he writes about is not an India, the Western reader, because after all, it is learned quite a lot in the West, expect to read in Indian literature. What does the Western reader, for long anyway, has expected from India? Yeah, well, Maharajas, yogis, sadhus, paupers, victims of the caste system, wild beasts, etc. And I don't imagine that India, like other countries, is basically a country of ordinary people. I don't know how many Maharajas are in the room, but probably not very many. So, and yet, Narayan's novels deal with religion, speaks about gods, demons, etc. And one social critic, a Russian, Kalinikova, and she makes a clear point about reading Narayan's novel. He speaks about the Western reader. One of the features of Indian civilization is the almost unbroken continuity in its literary tradition over a period of more than 3,000 years. The second is the still surviving vitality of the ancient in the modernity. Basically, what does it mean? That in India, most people are familiar, more or less, with Ramayana, Mahabharata, the gods, etc., even if they are not religious. Remember the success of the Mahabharata on the television, and And of course, you don't have that in the West, not at all. Particularly in Europe, and I would say even more so in France. Church attendance is limited to a few old people, and nobody in France knows or has read the Bible or the Gospels. So if you take people who go to museum, you see classical paintings. Classical paintings, I mean, before the 1800s, deal with the Bible. You go to Rome and all that. You have scenes from the Bible and the spectator, the visitor to the museum, he can appreciate the painting, but the allusion to the Bible will be lost. Maybe a title or subtitle, but no. So while this is not the case, I think that's right, in India. Now, to continue without losing too much time, his approach to writing. How does he write? How did Narayan wrote? Well, in Narayan's case, the answer is simple. Writing comes naturally. First of all, he doesn't check any facts. That is only possible because you write about the mythical town. Malgudi doesn't exist. So he doesn't have to check whether the train arrives at such a time or such events took place. To avoid fact-checking, then he invented the town Malgudi. And he said it was in September 1930 that the name of the town had been vouchsafed to him by divine patron of knowledge. Malgudi was an earth-shaking discovery for me because I had no mind for facts and things like that, which would be necessary in writing about any real case. In fact, I won't say he's a lazy writer, but he takes things easily. No fact-checking, and we see a bit more about the way he writes, not just fact-checking. He writes without any plan. When he starts a book, he starts from an idea, and he lets himself be carried on. That is what he says. And once he has settled on some general idea, then he goes on. When I sit down to write, that's it, not me. When I sit down to write, I have no more than a vague idea regarding the outcome of the day's work. It would be not far wrong if I say my fingers on the typewriter know more about what is coming than my head. The details of what I write each day when I am at work on a novel work themselves out. This means that one's subconscious self should have a lot of unimpaired freedom. Writing a novel is both a conscious and subconscious occupation. It is something both of the intellect and something superior to the intellect. So he says, very unusual, that he has no plan and that he doesn't really correct himself. That is hard to believe. Usually when you have manuscripts or writers, you see that scratch, charge, they add something. No. Well, again, when I was in Boston, I had the opportunity of reading some of his manuscripts, those written by hand before he got a typewriter. And it is true that between the first draft and the final page printed, very few changes. So he doesn't correct himself, that is true, he has no plan, what is true. So what do you read in the margin? Something very practical. When you see the manuscripts of the writer, they can add, I have to insist on such a character, I have to insist on such an idea. There, no. In the margins of the manuscript, he noted, I must add 2,000 words to the chapter, or I must add 200 words to the page, just in terms of quantity, and not of, I would say, quality, but so as I said, his approach to literature, he paved the way to writers like Jeny and all that. Jeny, mystery even, another contemporary Indo novelist. Now Malgudi has a life of its own. Characters there are Malgudians. They have been in Malgudi for generations. Very few newcomers. But the town changes. It adapts to modernity, slowly. An example, the cinema, where they project talkies. Very early. The first talking film, sound film in America was in 1929. And to Narayan, in Malgudi, talkies arrived 4 years later, not longer. So it's very, very quick. Cars replaced bicycles. Already in those days, wow, not as much as today. There are lorries going in up and down to build a new dam. So, new dam of the valley. So this happened at an ordinary speed, which means that people have time to adapt. And have time to adapt, and this is why, as ordinary people, they represent people the world over. In fact, you have people with an Indian coloring. Now I come to what is more tragic, the West. To me, it is an essential message in Narayan's novels. It deals at length with it. Not only in concentrating on the common man, his using of language that Narayan is known, the message is delivering through his novel is a new one in Indo-Anglian literature. Take Murkharjanan, he concentrated on India, the problems of Indian poor people, etc. I won't go back on that. Rajarao Katapura, the same. The rest is philosophy. And mystery, for instance, mystery, a fine balance. It draws also a realistic picture of India, as it is. Remember, Ahunada Tiroid, the god of Mosin, was also based on India, and Indian society. So Narayan warns his country. The biggest danger for India is the intrusion of the West. And that is not new. Remember, the last great Mughal, Aurangzeb, not the best one, in my opinion. Anyway, he condemned his advisor, Tej Bahadur, to be beheaded because he was accusing him of being interested in his women, in the harem, his wives, and his money. And before being beheaded, this advisor said, I do not look to your apartments or your wives, but I look in the direction beyond the seas, where the Europeans come to destroy your empire. He referred to the first boats of the East India Company. That was just the beginning. He had a sort of four visions. Be careful, they come and they will destroy. Not just do commerce. So beware of the West is the essential message. He doesn't only point to the danger, but he gives the key to the answer. Either India takes the key or not, or maybe no longer interested. So novel after novel, we see the West moving to the heart of society. And to him, of course, there is no possible sharing of values. You are on one side or on the other, and you cannot change. About Malgudi, for instance, our world was neatly divided between this side of the railway line and that side. The railway line, of course, is the West. That is clear. The river Sarayu also divides Malgudi from foreign occupation, like this ridiculous World Quadruped Relief League organization who comes from California to defend animals, cows in particular, in India, as if they had to be defended from California. So, the West comes, but the West, in Narayan's novel, is always represented by Indian characters. Nobody comes from the West. It is Indian characters, someone who adapt who adopts, an attitude which is pro-Western. First example, just take a few examples. Medical practice in the English teacher. There is the European, the Indian, who is a European doctor, who practices European medicine, and the local medicine. Then he speaks of his wife, who is dying. The Western doctor knows the illness. He knows the illness he's fighting against. He knows how it will evolve. He knows the power of the medicine. He accepts defeat, and to accept defeat, he explains the present state of scientific knowledge. And in the future, scientific knowledge will cure what we cannot cure today. And he isolates the doctor. For the local doctor, Ayurvedic, I believe, or anything, medicine is, or illness, is an act of God. It means there is a religious religion. So to cure the illness, the gods must be procreated. Prayers are essential. The patient must be kept within the family circle, who is also expected to play a part in curing the patient. So the Indian doctor is integrated in the community, but the Western one is excluded. He's like an omniscient God. He might have been a great machine dispensing health, welfare, and happiness. However, at that stage, Narayan doesn't take sides, because his wife dies, cured by the Western doctor or the local doctor. And in the other book, the same thing happens. I'll take another example which is not referred to very often. Margaya, in the financial expert. Margaya is a money lender. Now, you know a money lender in the village. He gives you money and you pay him back with interest, of course. And he faces a new building, the Central Cooperative Land Mortgage Bank, big bank. They do the same thing, basically, but differently. So, what does Margaya do? Instead of giving out money and collecting interest, he's going like the bank. He will give you money and promise he will get your money, you will give him money, you will trust him, and he'll promise interest, like in the bank. You deposit money in the bank, and they guarantee 2, 3, 4% interest. He does the same, except that he doesn't know how a bank works. He's a money lender. So when people deposit money with him, what does he do? He keeps the money for himself. He doesn't invest it. He doesn't understand that between the bank and the money lender, the difference is not just in size, it is in nature. It is totally different. The bank invests, he doesn't invest. And in the end, of course, his business collapses. Now, in the other novels, the West becomes even more dangerous. And of course, you have it in the Manitou of Marguli. I'll just concentrate on that one. You know the Manitou of Marguli? And the Manitou of Marguli is character of Basu. And Basu is Indian avatar of a Hollywood character, a Hollywood hero. Self-made man, sure of himself, physically huge, always keeps a gun, and curiosity, knowledge. He has to understand everything. The man's curiosity was limitless, and he recognized no propriety. Basu is a taxidermist. You know what a taxidermist is? Basu, probably. So he kills animals, he kills life, to turn it into stuffed animals. So on the one hand you have the live animal, on the other hand you have the dead animal. Physically the same, but not the same at all. Huh? So he represents death. And Narayan associates the West with death. If you remember the guide, Marco, is a specialist on cave painting. Paintings that date from thousands of years, dead paintings. His wife, Nalini, the one who will live in Mexico, Nalini represents what? Dancing, a living art. So, Marco is interested in dead art, Nalini in live art, dancing. So again, we have the opposition. The West is death, the East is life. So now, to go back to the manuscript of Maguri, the symbol there is Nataraj, who is a printer, works behind a curtain, a blue curtain. And blue, as you know, in sports, for instance, is the color of India. So Narayan didn't choose blue by chance. And Nataraj, despite his name, or because of his name, to him being a printer is a way of life. He likes to talk with his customers, he likes to spend time with them, while for Vasu, business is business. And you do not associate the two. Vasu enters Nataraj printing press. He came forward, practically tearing aside the curtain, an act which violated the sacred tradition of right press. So, as soon as he enters the book, Vasu enters as an intruder who destroys Indian values. So, Vasu, I don't want to spend long too much time, and it's going on. In the end, Vasu dies. He kills himself by a bit like a character in one of your books, you know, when he touches his head and not destroy him. So, what can we conclude from Vasu's presence in Maldives? Well, Nataraj will continue his studies, but he has understood something, that India, represented by Vasu, by the West, or the West represented by Vasu, has destroyed all of its values, all of Nataraj's values. Now, I'll cut short, otherwise we'll be there until tonight. One last example, the painter of signs. The painter of signs is a character, painter of signs. He represents, of course, traditional India. He's a painter of signs, but he likes scoffing, his friends, take time, etc. And he fell in love with a girl, Daisy, who is Indian also, despite her name. And Daisy represents everything anti-Indian. She hates children. She runs away from her family. She hates families. She works for the family planning institution, but it's not just that we must have no more than 2 children, no more than 1. For her, no children at all. As if she wanted to destroy the Indian population. And so she goes and she preaches that. And she convinces people. There's one person she doesn't convince in the village. It is an old priest, a very old priest. And she has reason with her, so she thinks. He has faith. He said, I don't care, we can have as many children as we want, it's God given, God will take care, etc. And she finds nothing to argue back. Narayan, if you want, leaves the debate not open, but he gives the victory to the old priest. So Daisy goes away. And conclusion about Daisy. Well, in the end, she accepts to marry Raman. Her in love, she accepts to marry Raman. And the marriage will never take place. Why? Well, because the day Raman is going to meet her to marry her, she's gone where? to a new appointment. She had a new appointment somewhere else, and so she decided it was more important to go to a new appointment than to get married. The message is clear. There's no feeling, just dry cruises. And this relationship, east to west, sometimes causes collateral damages. For instance, in that case, Rahman and Daisy, Rahman's grandmother, she doesn't want, of course, Daisy to live with Rahman. So she says, that girl, what is her caste? Caste is a word, I don't know, you can read all of Narayan's novels, you don't find it more than 5 times, I'm sure. So, that girl, what is her caste? Who is she? Isn't she a Christian or something? So, she refuses she doesn't even try to understand. And what does she do? She retires. She retires to Varanasi. So she renounces, she is defeated. The same in the vendor of sweet. The vendor of sweet, in the end, also retires. So that means twice India is defeated. They retire. Retiring is not fighting. So there could be, about the West Narayan's novels have been short, and but you could write a book about it. Huh? Now, a novelist, a Gandhian novelist I've seen already. So, to him, Narayan, does he give a solution? Is India condemned to adapt Western values? So, the problem, as I said already, I'm going back to my first point, is not to criticize Indian social institutions. It doesn't criticize, like Gandhi, it doesn't criticize the caste system, it doesn't criticize whatever you would like, you don't like. What he says is people do not live according to the values of our own social system. They have become hypocritical. The vendor of sweet, he thinks he's a Gandhi. He thinks he's generous. Why is he generous? Because every Friday he gives money to a beggar. But if another beggar comes, out you go. So it's not generosity, it's routine. I have my beggar once a week. Then he sells sweets, sugar. But he himself says sugar is bad, you shouldn't eat sugar, I never touch sugar. So he's like a man who, if you want, never smokes and makes money selling cigarettes. There's a contradiction. See? And that is typical of Narayan's approach. So the answer is to return to the Indian traditional values. Whether it is possible or not, that you tell me. He never speaks, for instance, of the economic vision. Once he is a Gandhian, he never speaks of Gandhi's vision of India, as opposed to Nehru's, for instance. And his last novel is a kind of farewell to that philosophy. Grandmother's Tale. It is a short novel about his grandmother, which links past and present. To cut it short, his grandmother was married when she was 7, with a boy who was 10 or 12, and they didn't live together, of course. They did play together. And one day, the boy, when he's 14, he says, look, I'm going to go, bye-bye, and he goes. He disappears. Nobody hears from him anymore. After 10 years, the village elders say to the girl, you must be regarded as a widow. Hence, etc., I won't go through the ritual of her widow. But she refuses. She says, look, I was married. It's not that. If you're dead, I prove it. And what does she do? Well, she does like he did. She goes roaming the country. Just after the Great Mutiny, yeah, so she goes there, and in the end, she finds him remarried, rich, he's become a diamond cutter, diamond specialist. And what does she say? She says, look, you are not remarried. We were married. Our marriage is the marriage. So, forget about the wife, forget about being a diamond cutter. You return to me, the village. She had a very strong character. And he returns without cut the story short. Huh? That means, what is the answer? The answer is defend your values. That girl, his grandmother, defended her values. I'm not a widow, I'm going to look for him and bring him back. So, in that way, Narayan, to me, is a Gandhian writer. Not because he wrote a book called Waiting for the Mahatma. I mean, to me, it's probably the worst book he wrote. But his characters are Gandhian, or they are not. Most of them are not, but they should be. So he returns the reader to the values of Gandhi. Now, how can I conclude in 2 words? Make it about an hour, not too long. And, well, what did Narayan introduce to Indo-Anglian literature? A totally new style and a new style of English, of the structure of his novels, his philosophy, and his criticism of society, which is often overlooked. Now, to finish, I could ask you one question. You were born at the time Narayan died, or just about. Huh? So, you were born in what we call a new India, compared to Narayan's India. Narayan's India is 19th century. People like me, who have known India since the grandfather was just born, 1974, India was a totally different country from what it is now. So, when you read Narayan's novels, how do you react? You think, well, good novel, but we are no longer concerned by those problems. Or you think you are still concerned by what he wrote about. If you are not, it means it will drop out and soon it will be forgotten about. If you are, then it will be reminded and it will be read again and again. But that's all I had to say, or what I limited myself to say. Because, as I said, you can have much longer conference on each of those points. Thank you. Do you have strength for questions? If I can answer them. So you don't want to tell me whether you think, when you read Narayan's novels, whether you're still concerned, you feel concerned by what he writes about, or whether it is, well, like when I read about Jeny or like that. Don't be shy.
Questions, please.
First of all, thank you, sir, for your talk. I was wondering about, when you just unearthed the issues of Indian societies and it's basically the integral part of the societies through RK Narayan. I was also thinking about during that time, Second World War was about to start, right? And what was the role that time? RK Narayan was, what was the RK Narayan reaction against those war and that turmoil, that conflict during that time?
think, from what I know, he never wrote about the conflict. He wrote about the First World War when he was very young, and there was that story of the Emden, maybe you heard about it, the German boat became shelled at Jeny, Madras and nothing remembered. But about the Second World War, no. I think he was against British, of course, but he did it in a sort of indirect way. I don't have any text, anything, where he commits himself to the war. Either, for instance, it could be, in India, I don't think there was a fight between Gandhi and Nehru with Britain, he's supporting the democracy, and both groups, I said we have nothing to do with the so-called democracy. We have to deal with anyone who helps us, Germany, Japan, etc. So that, no, it doesn't take sides. No.
And also I would like to know what made you interest on working
In Narayan.
on RK Narayan,
Well, I'll tell you what. From 1974 to 1977.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you just?
Sorry. From 1974 to 1977, you know those years did exist, but you don't remember them. And I worked at the Alliance Française in Calcutta. And I was looking for something to write a doctorate on those things. And one of my friends said, why don't you write on Narayan? It's it was beginning to be popular. But I can tell you, between 1974 and 77, I am sure I read everything written on Narayan. Articles, little books. That means there wasn't very much written. Today, if you want to write thesis on Narayan, you have to really concentrate your topic, and you won't read everything. I don't know how many books have been written. I don't know how many articles have been written in academic journals. And then I followed him up afterwards. So I grew with him. I won't say he grew with me, because he grew apart from me. But it's just a chance at the beginning. Well, I read his novels. If I not like them, I wouldn't write much. I like his novels also. That's how I got hooked to Narayan. And with him, all those Gandhian literature.
Thank you.
And Indo-Indian. Yeah?
Actually, I would like to answer your question about how we perceive Narayan
Yeah.
through an experience actually of reading a short story by Narayan in our class. It's a story called A Shadow by RK Narayan, and it was taught to us by a teacher called Edna Mansu in my UG days, and she paired it with a popular Malayalam poem called Atmavinori Chita, in which the same concept came, in which father dies. And she had this policy to stop the class 15 minutes before the bell, and we were halfway through the short story, and I continued reading it, and by the end of the session I had tears in my eyes, and I thought it was only me crying, and when I looked around, everyone was in the same position looking at the text and had tears coming up from the eyes and all. So I think he'll be still read again and again. We perceive him just like how the old India perceived him.
So you believe it can still be read?
Yes.
And what he writes applies to contemporary. I must say, it's short story. I've read them, some of them because there's a lot, but I'm not so keen on short stories, generally speaking. But yeah. Yes.
How do you perceive the difference between writing of Rajarao, Anand, and RK Narayan? Like Rajarao and Anand, they tried to touch upon the caste problem in India. Mufti is going through a dilemma. Mulk is discussing about it, but then he is not that
Yeah.
much comfortable discussing it, or he is avoiding, as you answered it. He is going through that Gandhian way of writing, where you don't talk about things, instead you choose to ignore them in a
Yes.
superficial manner.
I'm not sure he chose to ignore them, but the three of them, the trio, Anand, Rao, basically, when I mentioned Rao's Kantapura, the book, that is Gandhian, shows the difficulty to be for a high caste Hindu to be a Gandhian in those days, in those village. Otherwise, Rao is a difficult philosopher. Anand is a revolutionary, right? He wants to shock, he wants to hurt people, he wants to show even the British public. Remember in those days, to be known in India, you had to be published in England. Then if you were published in England, then fame came back to you in India. Now it's not different to be published directly in India. Not in those days. In his book, his autobiography, he remembers, I took my handwritten manuscript to the post office, and he said I could count 6 weeks to go. I went to England, 2 days for the editor to write a letter saying no, sorry, thank you. 6 weeks to return the manuscript. Until he was lucky enough to be recommended by Graham Greene. Pure luck. Forgot the question now. You said how, yeah. Anand, he wanted to show the British public how the British behave, but not only how the British behave, because in this novel, it's not as much the British as the Indian society. In Two Leaves and a Bird, yes, you have the exploitation of farmers, the change in agriculture and all that. But in Coolie, Untouchable, that is India, typically Indian. And in England, Forster liked his book, but many critics said, oh, but that is not literature. He's writing about things which are unpleasant. Yeah, you can write things which are unpleasant. And also his English is more provocative. A lot of insults, which it puts into English a Punjabi or insults. See? And of course that shocked the British public. So, but he was, and throughout his life, he remained, in fact, revolutionary. Remember, he worked with Nehru in one of the first governments, but he left because he thought Nehru was not revolutionary enough. So he was also, maybe more than a writer, an art critic. He published magazines on art, which is, I would say, it's strange being a Marxist. Usually the Marxists have a vision of art which is very associated with Marxism and all that. No, he was open to all forms of art. And he published magazines which dealt with art. So that's about the game. And Narayan, then, to me, his Gandhism, he expresses, you will have a sentence saying that, for instance, my friend came to see me, he is a Muslim, we've been friends since school days, that's all. That means Hindu and Muslim can be friends. He doesn't have to, no extra code, doesn't have to insist on that. And the government, well, he says there's a heap of stones somewhere in the corner of the street. That heap of stone was put there 20 years ago to repair the road. It's still there. Nothing has happened. Then you understand the administration is useless. You know, the government is useless, which tends to be his opinion. So that's how I think he expresses himself quietly and doesn't provoke. That's why some people are surprised when I tell them that Narayan is a social critic. Sure, when you read the book, no. But in fact, yes, when you read the book, if you know a bit about India and all that, see, he is criticizing. Nothing works in this novel. Nothing works. So there's a reason.
Sir, you emerged from the cultural capital of Europe, France, in general and Paris in particular. All post-war intellectual movements, philosophical movements, literary, cultural movements flourished in Paris. It has been the powerhouse of knowledge till this. Is it because of that seriousness or the serious socio-cultural milieu that made you to fall in love with RK Narayan, who is a very, very casual writer and thinker?
I don't know. As I said, it's his style, his approach, and his way of presenting India. That is interesting.
I just want to gently disagree with one of your points.
Yeah.
When you said Malgudi is India, not even South India.
No?
Malgudi is just the representation of a minuscule,
Yeah.
idyllic,
Yes.
rural community.
Idyllic, I don't know, but anyway.
It's not representing the whole India. It discusses even all his characters. If you analyze, all the characters are profession-based characters, like the painter or science, the
Yeah.
sweep and the,
Yeah, but you?
all these things.
Yeah.
So don't you think his critique of individuals but not the larger social system itself is a sign of hypocrisy?
I think he's critical about Malgudi. I think like Thomas Hardy's or Faulkner's geolocalization of places. In fact, by extrapolation, they represent the world. Even if they are American on one side, British on the other side, not even contemporary. If you have read South American literature, Marquez also, it is a bit of fantasy, but you can associate with the character. And this is what I mean. Someone in America, someone in France and Finland, they can associate with those characters. So basically, he has the same problem. He illustrates, I say, he gives those problems an Indian coloring. But it is just the coloring. The problems are that. And the answer to those problems, be honest with yourself. And that you could have everyone. In every society, people tend to hide themselves, to live an easy life, and to refuse to see that there are other things to do than just live an easy life. That is what I try to explain.
In one of your references, you made a mention of Murugan the Chiller by K. Srinathar, and you referred to it as a pamphlet. What
Yeah.
made you feel so? Because I strongly believe that it is one of the earliest
Yeah.
contributions to Indo-Anglian literature, because he was one of the earliest writers to write directly in English.
Yeah.
And Murugan
Yeah.
the Chiller is
What I mean is,
why did you call it a pamphlet?
upset because I think he presents, from what I remember, because I didn't read it last night, it was a long time ago. He delivers ideas, and the style is very important. It's in English, of course. While even for an delivers through ideas, really, but works with style. Same as Narayan. While I think Harmony and another one I saw another day now, they tend to forget the style. That's all. You have that in every country, people who just deliver an idea, which excellent idea sometimes, but either literature, then you take form, or Thank you. If you think of further questions, you can give them to Professor Root and they will continue.